On today's episode, I want to review this show called How to Sell Drugs Online Fast. Actually, I'm going to give sort of a shorter review, but mostly this episode is just going to recap everything that happened in Season 1. Because Season 2 came out and I wanted to do this recap pretty much unbiased. I hadn't watched Season 2 yet, and as soon as I'm done this video, I'm going to watch Season 2 and then give you my review and reaction to Season 2. Before I start though, I want to make clear, I definitely like this show. Otherwise I wouldn't be doing a video on it. I mean, sometimes I do videos on things I don't like and those videos don't do so well, but the shows I do like, I definitely like this show a lot and I definitely do recommend it to you. However, keep in mind this show is actually in German, so there's gonna be subtitles. And maybe that doesn't bother me so much because I've been trained at a young age to read subtitles in the art of watching Bollywood movies. Also, I guess for the majority of my life, I've been on the side of subs versus dubs when it comes to anime because I like to preserve the culture of the people who are making the art. But that is a battle for another day. Also, on that note then, very quickly, there is this kind of idea in North America where foreign films that have, foreign languages in them and then English subtitles that you read, they think of them as like exotic foreign film, artsy type thing. And that might be a turnoff for a lot of people, but I want you to get rid of the idea that this should be a reason not to watch this show. This show is really awesome and we should be more open-minded to shows that come from different countries now, especially because it's so available on something like Netflix. And this show is definitely one of the ones that I would suggest. Yeah, it's in German and you do have to read some of the stuff, but please don't let that turn you off. German is a beautiful language, but again, maybe I'm biased because I had to read a lot of philosophers that wrote German stuff. And I guess I also listened to some bands that sung in German too, so I don't know. Anyway, finally, before I start the recap, I just want to say that this time I am going to use a couple of notes here, which I took down while watching Season 1 again to make this video. And normally I don't do any research or write a proper script and read off it or anything like that because I like to keep my opinions and this video kind of relationship being perfectly authentic as if you were my friends and you wanted to support me. So if you definitely do, please like and subscribe right now and let's get into the video, the recap of Season 1 of How to Sell Drugs Online Fast. Okay, again, these are my own notes. I didn't look up these notes online and then copy them from some website or anything like that, so I may miss a few details, just forgive me, okay? Episode starts with the main guy, Moritz, talking to the screen as if he knows this is a Netflix show, as if it's a kind of documentary about his own life. That's not something you need to really pay attention to, this whole, oh, it's a kind of documentary Netflix thing. At least not right now. Maybe they make use of it later. But it is kind of interesting how they use how it is a Netflix show to their advantage sometimes. Specifically when they try to explain the sciencey parts of drugs and stuff like that, they use the skip intro button to skip the sciencey details about how drugs work. And I thought that was kind of cool. Anyway, the show really starts with Moritz looking at his laptop or a screen and a collage he made of all the fun young love adventures he had with his girlfriend, Lisa Novak. And we get to see sort of at the end of the collage, or maybe it's midway through the collage, that a plane leaves indicating that she kind of had left and that he's been waiting for her to come back this whole time. Now it appears she's finally on a plane coming back from America, her trips, and he tries to video call her. She picks up the call in the plane, which she isn't really supposed to, and funnily enough, Moritz makes this comment that you look wrecked, and to be honest, I kind of thought, yeah, because she's on drugs. It's not technically a breakup, but we don't really know what a break is even to this day, believe me. I guess according to Ross and Rachel, it means you can't cheat on each other, but at the same time, you're not technically together, and yet we know, those of us in the dating world, that sometimes you just say we need a break in order to pretty much ghost the other person and never talk to them again, so it's just a kind of slow breakup. Anyway, Moritz does have her password for all her social media, I guess, and does consider whether or not he does want to log into her Facebook to find out what she's been up to, but refuses to at that time. He talks about how he's a part of Generation Z and about how for their generation, the online world is such an important, huge factor. I think this is definitely true. For us millennials, we didn't even have like an online social world while we were in high school or middle school. What did we have, like ICQ? Anyway, Moritz and his best friend Lenny talk about how they want to achieve the loser dream, which is that though they're losers now, they are the bosses of tomorrow. A lot like a lot of the other big, great tech successes who were definitely still much nerdy outcasts when they were young and now are like economic super bosses. Like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, I guess. And Lenny mentions that he's finishing developing his app called Mitems, which I'll tell you more about in a bit. But while in high school, Moritz actually sees Lisa hanging out with Dan, the high school drug dealer. They then explain how hot and privileged Dan is online with all his crazy online adventures, and how he's kind of the son of a soccer player, what they would call a football player. Well, he's the son of somebody who's kind of a local celebrity because he's a part of the official sports team, I guess. So he's a cool, good-looking kid who's definitely privileged because of social status, and he deals drugs. Anyway, back to Lenny. He talks about how he made the most secure and advanced online shopping system in the world called Mitems, and that he was going to trust the admin password to Moritz because he needed somebody to be able to pass Mitems onto eventually completely anyway, because Lenny is gonna die one day. Actually, doctors told him he wouldn't have lived so long already, so he's kind of living in a kind of purgatory where he might die at any point in time. And he tells him a clue of the first date that they thought of Mitems, I think, which I think they explicitly described as the eBay for video games in the show. Anyway, I think because Moritz actually saw Lisa with Dan at school that he changed his mind and decided he's gonna log into her social media and use the password to see what she's been up to. And when he does, he finds a bunch of pictures of her doing and taking and having drugs. Oh no. So obviously Moritz doesn't like this. But while he's logged in and looking at her social media, he sees that she receives a message from Dan accepting her invitation to a party that she's throwing, a welcome back party. She was gonna throw a welcome back party without even letting Moritz even know. And so certainly Moritz, who was supposed to be her boyfriend, wasn't even invited to her welcome back party. Moritz sees Lisa pretty much type back live that his ticket into the party will be if he brings some of them pills. And from this, Moritz comes up with the genius idea that if I just make sure that Dan can't get any of the drugs, then Dan won't be able to go to the party. I guess that's what he was thinking anyway. Either that, or maybe he was thinking if he had some drugs, he'd be able to get into the party. I'm not too sure. Anyway, Moritz investigates all of Dan's social media, and because Dan puts out so much information about where he's going and what he's doing on social media, Moritz was able to figure out where actually Dan's going to get his drugs from the drug dealer. So Moritz actually goes to the drug dealer with a plan in mind. At first, he tries to offer the drug dealer as much money he could, which he actually took from the Mitems funding behind Lenny's back without even letting him know. But anyway, the drug dealer was like, you don't even have enough money for these drugs, because Moritz says he wanted to buy the whole bag of ecstasy. Anyway, Moritz didn't have any more money than that, so his genius idea was that he was going to take a picture of the drug dealer named Bubba. He was going to take a picture of Bubba with the bag of pills and blackmail him, saying that this is going to be sent to the authorities unless you give me the drugs, and it's already in the cloud and automatically set and everything to a countdown, so you gotta let me go and there's no way to stop it even if you destroyed my phone or anything like that. He kind of hustles Bubba into thinking that this blackmail thing was actually gonna happen, and so Bubba kind of lets him go, and Moritz takes the whole bag of ecstasy away with him. Though while leaving, he did say he promises to actually finish paying for all the amount for the drugs too. Anyway, Moritz sees online that Dan still does have some drugs on him. At least he didn't have to get some new drugs from the drug dealer. I guess they were his own personal stash he had in his own pocket or something like that. And his dad is a cop. So Moritz sends this automated text-to-speak message on their phone, or at least a call, their house call. And his dad, who's a cop and was going through a kind of, I guess, crime dry spell because he's always looking to catch somebody and didn't really catch much, gets this tip that his son Moritz actually sent to him, that this kid Dan is a drug dealer and he should be searched for drugs. Lenny finds out that Moritz actually took the money from the Mitems thing and is also super pissed off at him at this time. But also, as it turns out, the police weren't able to do anything to Dan because, as it turns out, finding 4 pills is not enough to charge him with trafficking or anything like that. I guess where they live, that's not enough to charge him and put him on probation or anything, because he was still able to go to the party somehow. I don't know, maybe it's because he's super privileged that he was still able to sort of get away with having a few pills in his pocket. Anyway, at this time we also find out that Moritz gets a message from his mom, and his mom does seem like she's trying to take an interest in his life, which we haven't heard much about her in the story yet, but it's quite clear that Moritz doesn't really care about her or about her trying to take interest in his life or anything like that. Anyway, Moritz decides to go to the party, and at the party I guess we see a lot of the kids having fun and on drugs and stuff like that, and Moritz kind of drops a few pills in the house and actually gets his butt kicked by Dan and ends up having to walk home all sad and alone and isolated because he also knows that even Lenny is angry at him. And at the end of the episode, he's basically in his room with a bag full of drugs, super depressed, humiliated in front of anybody, and even his best friend is kind of really pissed off at him for the way he's been acting, and his girlfriend just broke up with him. He feels like he's been robbed with everything, I guess, and he owes a drug dealer a lot of money for those drugs. So he decides he's got to sell those drugs to get the money to pay the drug dealer. What does he do? He looks it up online. How to sell drugs online. Sorry, that intro is just so awesome. It's a really awesome intro. I really like it. Anyway, episode 2. Episode 2 begins with this awesome imagery of being underwater, and they always use this imagery of being underwater with nice cool lights and having fun and stuff like that as a metaphor or an allegory for being on drugs and then coming to the surface and getting fresh air and the cold air and the sober world as a sign of being on withdrawal, I guess. And so they show Lisa coming from underwater to the real world after the party is over from the previous day. Now parents come home and it is a small town and kids want to get out, and one of the ways that they try to get out is by pursuing university outside of that small town. So her parents have her like doing these kind of mock interviews to try and get into different universities and stuff. And while she's doing that interview, the parents find the drugs that Moritz actually dropped in her house and actually confront her about it. Meanwhile, the drug dealer Bubba calls Dan and lets Dan know that some other kid came and got drugs from him too. Dan also offers to Lisa, after finding that Lisa gets called out for her parents for having drugs, he offers to come over and admit that the drugs are his. But because Moritz is still logged into her social media, he was able to delete Dan's offer off the messages before Lisa could even see it. Instead, Moritz comes up with the idea that he would go over to his house and tell her parents that they were his drugs, in fact. Now obviously the parents aren't gonna believe him because, hey, it's Moritz. But in the moments that the parents are away, Moritz does pull out a few more drugs, and actually Lisa at least believes him that it really was his drugs, and I guess he does get credit from her then for actually trying to take some responsibility for it. But it's not like Lisa is completely defenseless against her parents anyway. She does end up calling her mom out for also taking drugs and washing it down with wine every night and everything like that. I mean, it does raise an important discussion, which I think the show does somewhat successfully, and I think it needs to be brought up more, that just because you get drugs from a medical doctor and you're abusing prescription pills and painkillers and washing it down with wine at every night, it doesn't actually make your behavior any better or healthier than somebody who might be doing illegal drugs, knowledgeably doing illegal drugs, meaning somebody who's able to verify that the drugs that they are taking are at least pure and stuff like that. But I mean, you're still contributing to a criminal world, so it's not exactly the same. The mom then kind of reacts to it by calling out her husband, Lisa's father, for having cheated on her. Anyway, the parents sort of then punish Lisa by saying that they won't be financially supporting her for her trip, or rather for her academic pursuits after high school. Moritz tries to tell her, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it, I'll find the money somehow. Meanwhile, he finds out that his own scholarship application has been rejected. Then comes the infamous scene where Moritz decides, needing this money, that he was going to use the Mitems programming that was made by Lenny to set up an online drugstore in order to sell the bag of drugs. To be fair, while Lenny is definitely the real brains of the operation and everything like that in terms of the online world, it's not like Moritz is completely incapable. And showing a montage of all the work he does in one night, he sets up this online store, and it culminates with him using that passkey that was entrusted to him by Lenny, only to be used when Lenny dies. But you know, Moritz really needed to set up that shop and use Mitems to sell drugs, so he uses the passcode to set this thing up on the darknet to sell my drugs. Now he does go to Lenny and apologize using his text-to-speech thing that he always seems to use, and while Lenny is pissed, he's actually very surprisingly not super hateful about it and actually offers to check out the code, which Lenny does check out and says that he can fix up a few things here and there, I guess, and says this should be like Fight Club, where we never talk about Fight Club, which, by the way, Lenny, don't talk about it. Point is, they have a little discussion with Lenny, the more brains of the operation, to describe how exactly they will be able to set up this whole operation to fly under the radar of anyone trying to stop them. It's enough online tech jargon for me to at least feel like, okay, these guys know what they're talking about. I mean, I can tell enough if something makes sense, but on the other hand, I can't exactly check out somebody else's vulnerabilities because I'm not a hacker myself. But anyway, it seems like they know what they're doing with this now, that is actively online to sell drugs, but it's still on the darknet. Darknet, dark web, deep web, whatever you want to call it, that's pretty much what they're calling it in this part of the world. They call it the darknet. Anyway, Bubba the drug dealer is looking for the kids and happens to run into Lenny at his high school. And that's how the episode ends. Now on to episode 3. So episode 3 starts off with Lenny and Moritz packing the drugs in Moritz's room, and you know, obviously saying online that it's a clean room and everything's perfectly safe, but they're running this whole operation from this kid's really small bedroom. Anyway, Bubba the drug dealer shows up at their house and knocks on the door, and Moritz's young sister, who's 9 years old, 11, she kind of trustingly lets Bubba into their house to go see Moritz because he says it's Moritz's friend. Or more like he said he was there to bully Moritz, and she was like, okay, good. So Bubba the drug dealer goes into Moritz's room and pulls a gun on Moritz and Lenny. Bubba, who's definitely kind of funny, not gonna lie, says that he wants his money back and he wants it right now. Anyway, Moritz has explained what he's done with the drugs and how he will be able to get the money back to him, but in fact he wants a more reliable providing it. He does a little bit of a business pitch to Bubba to explain how rapid his growth can be selling drugs online with his online store. And I think for a moment Moritz forgets that you're dealing with a real drug dealer and steps out of line because he requests a 10 grand investment from Bubba into their business. Bubba smacks the heck out of him for asking that. But you know, the guy still seemed reasonable, or at least as reasonable as a drug dealer possibly can be, and says that he'll give him 2 grand instead and tells them, you make the 2 grand into 10 grand for me and then we'll talk about whether or not I want to invest. But he does say, I'll be your reliable dealer until then, and then they drink on it, which at the same time they drink on it with orange juice, and Bubba kind of derides him for drinking orange juice because it has sugar in it and talks about the stats of how many Germans die from sugar every year, which I kind of love it whenever they make these drug dealers talk about like unhealthy things and stuff like that. Like, I always find it really humorous when drug dealers are portrayed like this, or actually like this, when they talk about how, you know, you shouldn't have sugar because it's really bad for your mind or for your body, and it's just like, it's a pleasure you're having while you're ingesting these poison. And meanwhile, it's like, dude, you deal drugs. Or you smoke and you drink alcohol. Like, you don't think you're ingesting poisons that are there to destroy your brain and body for temporary pleasures? I don't know, I kind of find that sort of thing funny sometimes. Anyway, Lenny expresses the desire to leave and quit the whole thing because he just got a gun pulled on him, and that's pretty serious. But it does seem like they are getting a lot of interest online because at least the products are reaching the people and the service is running properly. But the product itself is getting a lot of bad reviews, and they actually get a message from somebody called Purple Rain saying that they might be able to help. Now in class, a project comes up and the high school teacher assumes that Moritz is just going to be paired with Lisa to do this project, but Moritz, because I guess they're on a break, says, no, I'm with Gerda. Out of nowhere! Gerda, by the way, is another really pretty girl, a part of the 3-friend group that's in with Lisa and Fritz. And we saw Gerda at the party earlier, who happens to be like the only other person that actually noticed or cared that Moritz showed up to the party. Anyway, meanwhile, the other girl, Fritz, keeps texting Lisa to encourage her to be with Dan and sends her a D pic of him. It's not really him. Anyway, Lisa goes home and cracks out her old school chemistry set, I guess from when she was younger, and she actually tests the drugs that Moritz had given her, the same kind that he had dropped in her home. After doing some of her little bit of chemistry tests and stuff, which are amazing, I mean, she's obviously really actually a very smart girl to be able to do this stuff. The results are, it's a boy. I mean, actually the results is that the drugs aren't just pure MDMA, it has PMA in it too. By the way, if you don't know, the active fun drug thing is MDMA, but commonly MDMA is mixed with other stuff into pills, and that's called ecstasy. Now ecstasy, I guess you could say pure ecstasy is MDMA, but even if somebody gives you pills saying this is MDMA, or you know, loose hand for it is Molly, or this is real Molly, if you're getting it in pill form, very likely it's mixed with other stuff anyway, so it's gonna be very rare to find. And I'm saying all this stuff as if I do this drug. I do not. But I guess I was a part of a world in which this sort of knowledge just came about somehow or other. Anyway, what you want is pure MDMA. Whether you can actually get it in a pill form or not, I don't really know. You must have a really awesome dealer. Don't ask me questions about how to get drugs or how to sell drugs, cause I don't know snack. Although I did watch a docu-series once, which is this show. That's it. That's all I watched. Anyway, Lisa calls up Lenny and tells him that, you know what, your thing has PMA in it, which causes people to vomit and get sick and stuff like that, so don't take it, it's a bad drug. Also, her parents are getting divorced. Meanwhile, actually, Lenny is like, you know what, we have a business and we don't even know what our product is. So that kind of made him think that he should try a pill. So he takes a pill and he just goes temporarily nuts for a moment. But I wanted to say real quick that in the message that Lisa does send to Moritz, she does give this message that says something like, your drugs are dangerous, they're PMA, don't take them. But hey, if you do find some good Molly, let me know. And I know I'm doing a recap and I don't want to intervene too much of my own personal opinion, but yo, if you have a guy or just somebody who's really into you and you're kind of distanced with them, but you give them an opportunity to have some relevant conversation about a certain thing, saying to that person, if you happen to come across this thing, let me know, is almost gonna be interpreted to them as, go find that thing so we can talk about something that's mutually interesting that we both like and kind of reconnect on that same thing. Like, I can't expect high school girls or high school boys to really understand what kind of things are happening in communication like that, really. I don't really know. But if you are an adult, maybe this opinion might help you. But if you do have somebody who's interested in talking to you and you pretty much relegate them to only talking to something specific, and you pretty much only refer to this one thing which you say you're kind of interested in, that kind of psychologically, even if not consciously and only subconsciously, will motivate them to go looking for that thing in order to talk to you about something mutually interesting. So in a way, that text message kind of is a signal to Moritz, go find some drugs. Anyway, we see that Moritz is still deleting a lot of Dan's messages to Lisa. And we also find out that Moritz does decide to contact this Purple Rain guy online, who turns out to be an F-16 pilot, and they did some kind of trusty tradesy thing where they both tell each other secrets, and the secret is that he's an F-16 pilot who's killed 20 people, and Moritz trades a secret that he was left alone when he was a kid with his sister. Their mother abandoned them to be with some other dude. And yeah, so being abandoned by your mom when you're a young kid can definitely leave some scars on you, and they're definitely leading into this type of thing. Anyway, this Purple Rain person trusts him from this traderoo and gives him certain coordinates, very specific coordinates. At school, Dan confronts Lisa about why she's not responding to his texts, and Lisa's like, you haven't been texting me, and Dan's like, yeah, I have, and kind of shows his phone showing her proof that he has been texting her, and she's like, what's up with that, and kind of does an experiment, telling Dan, send me a heart. So Dan's like, alright, and he does. Lisa pulls out her phone and sees Dan's heart message get deleted right in front of her own eyes. And while she notices that, she happens to catch Moritz actually standing outside looking at his phone doing something on it. Putting two and two together, Lisa realized that Moritz is the one who's been deleting her messages from Dan. So she's mad angry, and while in the high school office, I guess, she gets the PA system. She gets on the PA system where she can make announcements all throughout the school using the speaker system, and she makes this announcement about don't hack into your girl's phone, especially if it's your ex-girl's phone. I mean, don't hack it no matter what, but anyway, she's like, don't hack into your ex-girl's phones, and gives a speech about how she has changed and she doesn't understand why other people can't see that, and about how people expect her to be a certain way and all that stuff. You know, teenage identity and growth issue stuff, which I'm not trying to sound patronizing when I say that. Those are definitely important issues. I mean, heck, I'm watching this show. But anyway, Dan went rat mode and outed Bubba to the police. The police end up booking Bubba and taking him in and getting all the phone and tech that Bubba had on him, including the contacts to Moritz. Anyway, Lisa does end up completely blocking off Moritz on all of her platforms and everything like that. Moritz and Lenny end up going to the coordinates that were given to them by the Purple Rain guy, and at first they're trying to dig stuff out of the ground as if Purple Rain had dug it in the coordinates, but it turns out, surprise, a plane comes from above and drops those drugs down on them like boom. Nobody had to meet nobody, nobody had to see anybody's faces, no identities were revealed. I mean, they're talking to a drug dealer who's on a whole next level of this operation. Actually, when I think about it, maybe their online store, Mitems, is on that level, and so this person dropping drugs from their plane is just that level, but in person. Anyway, Moritz tries to right away call Bubba and say, I'll have your money, and it turns out his dad is the one who picks up the phone at the police station and is like, hello? So he hangs up, and that's how the episode ends. So let's go to episode 4. So this episode starts with everyone hating on Moritz, thinking of him as a hacker, because in the previous episode, of course, he was outed on the PA system, so the whole school heard how he kind of hacked into her phone. Moritz really desperately just wants to apologize to her and give her a gift, something that he was preparing to give to her when she came back home, but Lenny kind of calms him down and starts saying, yo, act like a human type of thing. Lenny gives him this talk to tell him to think differently and have this little discussion about the differences between flies and bees and how they're kind of the bees and yet Dan is kind of the flies. That yeah, while a bee is much smarter than a fly, because a bee can fly out of a bottle really fast, whereas a fly will try to fly in every single direction until eventually it finds the opening, the bee just tries to find the source of light and flies right out immediately. But if the bottle is upside down, then it's actually the bee that gets stuck, because the bee won't be able to get out, but the fly, trying every single direction, will eventually find its way out. Now at Moritz's home, his younger sister happens to make friends with this other young girl who is like a big influencer or whatever. Another 11-year-old that has a massive online following who has like 2,700 IG followers, which I say is massive as a kind of joke because we all know real massive is like in the millions. But the reality is, I don't even know somebody who has that many IRL. So I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you right now, please subscribe to my YouTube channel to help me achieve my goal of being able to compete with an 11-year-old. Anyway, I guess Moritz's younger sister is more interested in trying to become an influencer, I suppose. At Moritz's family dinner table, his father kind of asks him to help with the seized phones and laptops that they got from Bubba to find out who else he was contacting. And so Moritz kind of has decided that he will be the hacker man and decides that he would help, and saying he's gonna go all in on this identity. The show then shows Lisa in therapy and how she's not really taking it seriously, and even outs her mom as a person who has an addiction problem on pills in front of the therapist. Meanwhile, near the therapy office, she does run into Dan, and we don't really know why Dan is truly there either, but it's quite clear that Lisa's mom doesn't really like Dan or doesn't really like Lisa hanging out with Dan, even though it's equally clear that Lisa's mom isn't a good person either because she drives out of a handicap spot that she probably shouldn't have been parked in. Afterwards at school at a lunch table, we find out that Gerda was a sort of gamer girl and used to be a part of a gamer girl lifestyle with Lisa that Lisa has now left and is trying to encourage her to get back into it. Gerda is also kind of called out by Fritz for having a sort of crush on Moritz and kind of says that's the reason why Gerda is constantly defending Moritz, saying that, you know what, Moritz isn't really a hacker. He's not really a stalker kind of bad person. Anyway, Dan and Lisa have another encounter where kind of Lisa asks Dan about why he was in the therapy and how she was surprised to see him there, and Dan kind of says, yeah, you know what, my life isn't that great either, and they kind of have some kind of flirty garbage moment. And they kind of have this kind of flirty moment in which Dan gets a sneaky pic with her and says that he won't upload it, but you know he's gonna upload the picture. Then at Lenny's house, Lenny's mom does say something to him like, what would I do without you? And then at that moment, I really thought, man, Lenny's gonna die. For whatever reason that I can't remember now, Lenny checks out their home server or whatever and sees the emails that his mom has been receiving and finds out that she has applied to adopt another child. And this kills Lenny. Lenny feels like his mom is already planning to replace him with another child for when he's dead. And maybe because of how horrific he feels about it, he really needs to open up and talk to somebody, so he talks on the online chat for this game Dota. And someone reaches out to him and says, you know, you can talk to me about it, which happens to be a girl. Ooh. She's apparently like a pro gamer in Dota, which, by the way, don't ask me about that. I'm not a gamer. At least I'm no longer a gamer. I've lost too many hours. So many memories. At the police station, Dan's superstar soccer father or whatever, with his big privilege, you know, jerk ways, walking around like he's the boss and pushing other people around, and kind of gets his son out on bail or whatever, pays his fines, and gets him off the leash of the police and takes him away. Even though the reality is that he did kind of help him being a witness to put away Bubba, sort of. But being a jerk he is, that Dan's father doesn't really treat Dan all that well, and actually Moritz's father, the police officer, kind of sticks up for Dan and says he deserves some respect. But you know what, Dan's father still wasn't having it and was just kind of complete jerk and walks off. After that, they realize that their online shop needs to grow, like they're not gonna reach their growth projection and they're somehow hitting a wall. As it turns out, they realize that while the dark net or dark web or deep web or whatever you want to call it is super big compared to the surface web, it actually has a very small population of users, and that the mass amount of people that they would love to be able to reach is actually on the surface web, which they call the clear net. Okay, so the clear net. They would want to be able to take their drugstore from the dark web onto the surface web, onto the clear net. And then their resident genius online person, Lenny, talks about the possibilities of how they would be able to do this without being tracked. Again, they do a pretty good job of explaining it through some tech language in ways that I don't completely understand, but I completely trust that it does make sense. And they do this while watching the mailman take the drugs from the mailbox, I guess. At Lisa's place, she's going through her mom's drugs while her friend Fritz is there to find the good stuff, the stuff that would actually activate the feel-good feelings in the brain. And Fritz asks her, why don't you actually go with Dan? You know, that photo that Dan posted with you two is actually getting a lot of reaction, so it seems like a lot of people are quite excited by the idea of you guys hooking up, so why wouldn't you just enjoy it? And Lisa's kind of really looking at it abstractly like, hey, you know what, it's just all chemicals in the brain anyway. I don't care if I have an attraction to him or not. You know what? I mean, maybe that's part of what she's learned from the drugs. Meanwhile, for the project, Greta... Shoot, sorry if this whole time I've been calling her Gerda versus Greta. I may have been doing that. I may have been calling Gerda Greta or Greta Gerda a few times now. Forgive me, I'm gonna probably continue with this mistake. I'm sorry. Anyway, Greta is Moritz while they're working on the project, and she kind of invites him to this club for her birthday party, which her uncle owns. Like, don't worry, us kids can get in because my uncle owns the club. and you should come to my birthday party. But Moritz is like, no, I'm not really interested, but does say, you know, we'll see. They then show Lisa actually try to get back into the gaming world and reconnect with her old life, and of course Gerda is a part of it, and she's a part of the chat room, and so Gerda's kind of listening to Lisa talk about it in the chat room, how her life has changed and what she's gone through, and how everyone around back in her own town still seems the same, and that she thought she would have missed a lot, but she missed nothing. Everyone's the same, she's not surprised, and she's kind of really dissatisfied with her hometown. So Greta kind of takes this as motivation to get some drugs for her party, I guess. And where does Greta get those drugs? From the My Drug shop, which Moritz and Lenny runs. They also show at this point that Lenny's relationship with this online Dota girl has evolved because he's willing to start calling her, but he still obviously feels insecure about being differently abled or his weight and stuff like that. I think in part because of the comments she was kind of making. But anyway, while at the police station, Moritz is there having his option to really commit to the hackerman identity, I guess, because he's given Bubba's a laptop and his tech to find evidence. But Moritz takes this opportunity, sees evidence of his own contact with Bubba, and pretty much wipes the entire hard drive. And that's how that episode ends. Let's go to episode 5. In class, Moritz is doing his presentation with Greta, and basically the presentation is about troubled kids. And actually Lisa pipes up about how nobody's talking about certain things, like drug use, and then gets shut down by the teacher. But Moritz actually kind of comes to her defense with a little speech about how it's so easy to identify with what's bad and say we shouldn't talk about what's bad. At the same time, society is perfectly fine with other things that are also obviously clearly bad, like zoos, which are basically prisons for innocent animals, which he kind of has a point about that. Saying ultimately it's weird that we can't openly talk about what's bad for kids in one sense, and at the same time we are also open about other things that we also know are bad. Anyway, Lenny, our resident smart guy, finishes the coding to be able to take the My Drug store from the dark web to the surface world, or the clear net as they call it. And to celebrate that, they meet in this restaurant that is kind of special to both of them with this water light show and everything, and there's a really funny moment where it seems like Lenny's just instantly falling in love with the waitress, which I thought was completely hilarious. Anyway, while they're in the restaurant, Moritz explains to him that he had already actually found another supplier. Because while Lenny was working on the coding, Moritz was doing his end of the CEO side of the thing, and he wanted to expand the assortment of the available purchases that people could buy from his shop. So he had this idea that he would go straight to the suppliers, and he kind of got a ride share to go straight to the suppliers. And so at the place he was supposed to go, he meets these people who seem to be the top dogs of the drug dealing business or whatever, and they kind of make this comment about how he really doesn't seem like a person who's ever had fun in his life. And that's kind of funny actually, because it's a callback to when the drug dealer Bubba was kind of skeptical about trusting him because he made a similar comment about how he looks like he's never had fun in his life. So it was a fun kind of callback. Anyway, Moritz reveals who his current supplier is, Purple Rain, to the new dealers, and that's kind of shockingly open for him to just admit it right there on the spot. Maybe it's because of Moritz's naivety or whatever, but because of that, it kind of makes these new supplier people trusting of him. And so they give him this kind of starter kit of the good stuff. And I don't know if you bought computer stuff recently, but apparently more colors equal better. And the same seems to be true in this sort of drugstore. Anyway, so having revealed to Lenny that he just got this new stack of a wider variety of drugs and that there's a new supplier, and that he did this as the CEO, it kind of really turned off Lenny. He's like, stop acting like this is a real business and that this is a real startup. We're ultimately just drug dealers, and I just want you to be normal again. I just want to be able to hang out with my friend and chill sometimes. In fact, Lenny says to Moritz, this whole thing is probably about your issues with Lisa, and then just says like, I'm out. So Moritz back at home runs into his little sister, and his little sister is gonna have a birthday party and says, you know who's gonna come up? Mom's actually gonna come. And Moritz is kind of turned off by this, like, don't raise your hopes, don't be gullible, she's never gonna come, she's not a reliable person. Meanwhile, Lenny starts printing that get. And it may look like a toy, but trust me, this guy got some real bullets in that thing. Moritz decided to accept the invitation to go to the birthday party of Greta's, and while he's getting ready, they have this song playing in the back. I thought the future would be cooler, and it's kind of interesting because he's getting ready, and honestly there's an awesomely cool shot that I thought was kind of cool when they show in the mirrors of the 3 mirrors Some of the mirrors end up reflecting Dan's image instead of his own, so it kind of looks like he is losing himself for a moment and is trying to keep grips with his own identity, and I thought that was a cool shot anyway. So after getting ready, he picks up a bag of drugs and goes off to the party. In the club, Greta shows that she has some of her own drugs now that she ordered online from the My Drug stores, and she's kind of like, look at me, I'm cool now, yay! I'm kidding, that's not exactly how it went, but you know, cool, you have drugs, whatever. While outside among the three girls, Fritz really pushes Lisa to just be with Dan because she pushes the idea that we should just pursue hedonism due to the truth of nihilism. Which, let me just say that again, basically their lives are gonna be pointless and meaningless, even though that they're young, beautiful, talented young people, that they understand that they're the beautiful, nice, smart ones in their little town. Despite being special as teenagers, Fritz, accepts that they will not be special, they will not be important as adults, that all your dreams and specialness and how you're going to change the world won't actually impact the world in any significant way, and ultimately you're just going to be another adult boring person. And I know a lot of adults that actually do feel this is kind of true. But as a result of that, she's like, so then why not just enjoy the youth then? While we are special, while things do feel amazing, why not take the drugs? Why not be with somebody who you might have attraction to? Just go and do it. And Lisa kind of accepts this argument. Yeah, there is no meaning anyway. There's nothing going to be special about the future. She was already on this kind of tip earlier, talking about how nothing she's going to do is really ultimately going to impact the world. She's already become sort of nihilistic prior to this. And so she kind of accepts the argument that fine, let's just go and be as hedonistic as possible, enjoy what I want. So she goes and kisses Dan on the dance floor. At that moment, actually Moritz is right there and he witnesses it. And that kind of crushes him, I guess. Lisa notices that Moritz is there while he's kind of walking out. Greta, who's high off drugs, kind of sees Moritz and tries to kiss him, but Moritz, having just seen Lisa kiss Dan, was kind of completely out of the headspace and was just like sorry and just leaves her there. Feeling like a sad and lonely boy, and seeing his relationship get that final nail in its coffin, he's too outside sitting in this kind of mindset that life is just difficult, hard, and short, so why not just live it big? And finally decides to take his store officially onto the surface web, onto the clear net, onto the public light, where anybody can find drugs now online. You don't have to even go to the dark net or the dark web to look for it. Imagine going to Google and just looking up an actual supplier who will literally just get you drugs in a safe way if you order it. And good drugs too at that. You know, while all the other kids are doing drugs inside the club, sad Moritz is sitting outside alone and he's running drugs online in public light now. And everybody notices. A whole bunch of people who take drugs notices, but also his suppliers notice, also the police notice, namely his father notices, and then they show Greta having a real bad reaction to the drugs, or rather that she had taken too much drugs and she was getting overdosed. Bubba, who gets out of jail since all the evidence was deleted by Moritz, ends up paying Lenny a visit, thinking that it must have been Lenny and Moritz who ratted him out, when we all know really it was Dan. Now, Moritz finds out that Greta went to the hospital for having too much X and going on an overdose, and Moritz actually does a little bit of research on his online store to find out that an order was placed by Greta, and kind of wonders for a moment whether or not he should feel responsible, but pretty much ignores it, thinking like, you know what, it's not like he's responsible for someone else taking drugs and overdosing or not. That's not actually part of his thing, so he doesn't actually really feel guilty for Greta at all. Meanwhile, he finds out that Lenny is missing and he tries to go and find him, but then his dad just calls him out and is like, what the heck is going on with you, boy? And Moritz comes up with this excuse that, oh, Lenny met a girl online and so he's probably with his girlfriend, he spent the night with her and I gotta go find him and that's what happened. And his dad kind of makes a comment like, great, then you can kind of go on couples dates together, you know, romantic dates. And he's like, no. He finally admits to his father that he and Lisa are officially over. And his father gives him a hug and expresses sympathy for that. And by the way, his father is like trying his best as a single parent to be a good parent to both of his kids. Like, he is a very good man. He's just a really good man. So it turns out Lenny was taken back to the ranch, the place where Bubba was, you know, with his horses and everything like that. But before Moritz goes to see Bubba, he actually stops by Lisa's place to give her a gift, the thing that he wanted to give her when she came back home, and kind of just straight up tells her, honestly, if you don't want to be with me, that's fine, but I want to give you this gift. And then says he's actually there to see Dan. And Dan just happens to be there pantsless because, you know, he was probably on a lot of drugs with Lisa last night, exploring teenage things. Anyway, Dan at first is kind of ignoring him, but Moritz mentions a mutual friend, Bubba, and Dan's like, oh, so they go together to the ranch. So at the ranch, Moritz tells Dan that he knows Bubba thinks he's the one who ratted him out because actually Moritz still owes Bubba money. And he does know it was actually Dan who did the ratting out. So Moritz figures it's actually in a way kinda Dan's fault too that Lenny's in this situation. And ultimately says, look, I don't care what you want to do. If you want to tell the cops after this, go ahead. But my best friend is in danger and we need to get him out. So Dan kind of reluctantly agrees to help out. But while they're running on the ranch, actually Dan gets his foot caught in this like bear trap type of thing. And Bubba catches him outside and he just sees Lenny there trying to help Dan too. So he pretty much captures both of them and ties them up into this like livestock walking thing that forces them to walk around in circles like in a merry-go-round, but they're tied up to the edge of the fencing thing as they walk in circles. Meanwhile, the suppliers do end up trying to make a shipment to Moritz's house and run into the father, and the transporter for the suppliers just kind of gives one box and kind of leaves with the rest of the shipment. Anyway, back at the ranch, through the whole day, Moritz and actually Dan have been forced to walk around in circles and everything. And Bubba's there with his gun and everything, with Lenny out looking at them now, and Lenny's thinking about that gat that he made, you know? He's thinking about using that printed 3D gun that he has. But kind of providing an opportunity for Lenny to take that gun out is when Dan just kind of openly admits to Bubba, look, it wasn't these guys, it was me. If you're trying to figure out who's the rat, it was me. I'm the one who ratted you out. And that distracts Bubba enough, at least for Lenny, to get his gun out, which kind of does still look like a toy gun. And for whatever reason, I think it either stalled or it didn't fire, or maybe just Lenny chickened out and couldn't fire the gun, but he wasn't able to shoot the gun actually at Bubba. And Bubba kind of laughs it off and is like, what are you kids doing again with this kind of toy stuff, and takes the gun out of his hand and then does this sort of thing with it because he doesn't think it's a real gun, kind of like, yeah, whatever. But it was a really working gun and it had a real bullet, so Bubba just shot himself dead right there. And it did show that some of this was caught on camera, which I think they would lead to in the next season. But anyway, that's how the episode ends. Let's get to the season finale, episode 6. So the last episode starts with them showing the sort of birthday party for Moritz's younger sister, in which she's trying to take pictures and she has to retake a couple pictures to do it for the gram and get everything just right. Meanwhile, the three guys eventually did break out from the ranch, I guess, because Lenny was able to, you know, actually do things since Bubba wasn't around since he shot himself. And the three guys were pretty much shown just trying to clean up the evidence afterwards. And they kind of discussed how they might be able to explain away how they were involved with this whole thing anyway. Mainly because a printed gun kind of blew up on its own. Also, they took this moment to show that Moritz is again talking to the audience, like he knows this is a Netflix documentary thing again, in which he kind of says the lie version of what happened. So it's quite clear that what we see is the real thing going on, but what Moritz is gonna say while he is in that little talking to the screen thing might be a lie. So what he says to the screen when he's doing this Netflix special can be a complete lie, but at least the show is actually gonna show what's really happening. But again, what comes to mind is how they seem to be caught on that camera, and so I wonder if they're gonna address that later or not, whatever, or if they figured out a way to clear it. Anyway, Dan is like, okay, now it's time for me to give up and just come clean to the cops. I mean, technically he already did this before when he ratted out Bubba, so I guess he's much more familiar with the police, and I guess he also kind of has a good relationship with Moritz's father. When you think about Moritz's father did kind of praise him for having the bravery to come to them and rat out Bubba before, so maybe that kind of supported him in the idea that I should do it again. But before Dan was able to leave, Moritz and Lenny, in their kind of mental alliance to each other, were able to come up with a kind of coalesced narrative about how they are actually the victims and how it must have been Bubba and Dan that kind of forced Lenny into this whole situation anyway. Cause who are they gonna believe? A couple of nerds or these cool guy drug dealer people? Anyway, through this kind of blackmail, they kind of forced Dan to not actually come forward with the information he has to the police. And not only that, but Moritz does this real petty move and says you also can't pursue a relationship with Lisa. Which I'm like, yo, that's so petty. You just seemed like you were super cool in the previous episode when you went to her place and was like, if you don't want to be with me, you don't have to. And here you are telling Dan you can't be with her. Like, I don't know, it's such a contradiction in character. I'm not saying a contradiction in the story and the story writers, because teenagers are just contradictions sometimes, and I'll talk about that after. But Dan is ultimately brought into the fold and therefore convinced by this. So there's a nice picture recap in the kitchen with Moritz sitting down, showing how Purple Rain is out as a supplier and Good Times is in, and also that underneath Moritz is now Lenny and Dan. Then his sister comes in and confesses to Moritz that she's actually really heartbroken that her mom didn't come. This really contrasts how much of a show that she was putting on before at her birthday party, trying to be Insta perfect. I guess it's a good social commentary about how she's trying to portray this kind of happy, wonderful lifestyle, perfect for the gram and everything like that, but really she was completely destroyed at that party because she didn't have her mom around and she was promised that she would be there. Lenny just hugs her in this really sweet moment of mutual heartbreak that they have, that they were abandoned by their mother. But Lenny wasn't able to completely force the reality of that truth to his younger sister like he was, and takes a present that he was going to give to her, takes his name off and says, "Look, this is from Mom." So you might think that's kind of sweet, and I'm not really sure. It seemed like he was the one who wanted her to have tough love about the reality of the situation before, but now he's just too soft to live it through. At school, Lisa tries to apologize to Gerda for not being a really good friend and kind of says like, "Listen, I know you like Moritz and I'm okay with that." But Gerda calls her out and is like, "No, you're not okay with that. I know you, but that's okay." Now maybe because of that, Lisa pulls up that gift that Moritz had given to her at her house and scans a QR code on it. And from the QR code it links to a video collage, the one that we saw in the beginning, of all their young love moments together with Moritz and Lisa. And I guess now that she's been sober for a long enough time, it seems like she's really open to remembering all the great times she had with him. Back at school in the cafeteria, the new gang with Dan in the fold, the three of them are sitting there and they're discussing about how they've gotten a message from the new suppliers, and it says that they've kind of spoken to the old suppliers, Purple Rain, and they show in video that they kind of bombed Purple Rain's plane. Well, not bombed, but they sabotaged his plane so that his plane would blow up and then crash somewhere. Now technically you don't know if Purple Rain's dead or not, but for me this was the most heartbreaking part of the show, because I really liked that guy. Or girl, whoever Purple Rain was. I really like the kind of mysteriousness of Purple Rain and how professional they were in delivering everything. It was a bit more mysterious, kind of like how the dark net thing was kind of serious and more undercover too. So while technically we don't know if they're dead, we could just presume they are, which, man, that sucked because I really like the Purple Rain part of this whole story. But the Good Times people, these new suppliers, therefore declare, "We are now exclusively your suppliers." After reflecting, I guess Lisa approaches Dan in the urinals saying like, "You know what, I'm giving up on just not having conversations. If you have something to say, you just say it, no matter how awkward it is or where it is or when it is, including in the urinal." So she needs to tell him that whatever's between them, whatever relationship stuff they might have, she needs it to be put on pause because maybe she's not all that different from who she was before. Anyway, right after that, they then show how the local authorities have sort of figured out that the drugs are coming from their town and they're using the mailing system. So a new investigation is opening up to figure out this whole drug situation and how there's like an online supply to the world coming straight out of just their town. Then in the final scene of season 1, it shows Lisa entering Moritz's room just as Moritz was about to message Gerda to maybe meet up and hang out sometime. Wink, wink. Wait, I don't think I was supposed to say wink. Anyway, but hey, there's Lisa. She's back into his private room, back to meet with Moritz. So that was the season finale. That was all of season 1. I hope you like me recapping everything for you. I'm gonna give you just a few of my thoughts and leave most of my thoughts for the next video when I give you kind of reflection on what I thought about season 2 after I watched season 2. As for right now, I'm just gonna tell you a few things that I really love about this show that I think we all kind of think are kind of cool. Number 1, I have already mentioned that I really think it's quite artistic and kind of cool how they portray being on drugs as being underwater and the beautiful lights and colors and everything, and then coming back to reality, sobering up as when you resurface for air or oxygen. I thought that was kind of cool. Also, the treatment of the young online world, like that's a lot of thing that we see in a lot of different medium nowadays for young people, because online world is so much a part of everything. And I really think that it's very interesting that they're able to portray how this thing is also a skill in tapping into how they communicate with the adults and mess around with things in the adult world. Because when it comes to online, especially on the dark net or deep web or whatever, it doesn't matter at all who you are. If you got the skills to be online, you could be a 12-year-old kid. It doesn't matter who you are. It matters what you're doing when it comes to online stuff, especially when you can be completely anonymous. So that's cool, and I think there's a lot of untapped potential, and this show is definitely exploring it. And it's also exploring some of the ideas about how it seems to be so taboo to talk about drugs and how young people might want to explore and understand these things, and yet it's just completely shut down from adults, while those same adults might think it's okay to be, you know, taking Percocets at night every night, drinking it down with wine and whatever, or in Moritz's case, have zoos, I guess. And while there's so many kind of like seemingly character contradictions, so many things that I don't agree about the way Lisa communicates to Moritz. Like again, in the ending, she went and she told that guy Dan like, oh, our relationship, like it's not over. I just want to put it on pause. And then she goes and sees Moritz, like she wants to reignite and re-explore that passion she had with Moritz, or just reconnect with him somehow. And it's like, why would you be interested in reconnecting with your ex-boyfriend and telling this new guy who you just hooked up with, like it seems like she hooked up with him, took drugs with him and probably hooked up with him, that no, I'm not actually ending with you, I just want it on pause. It seems like you're kind of leading him on. And I'm not critical of the writing of these characters. These characters, despite being contradictory or despite treating each other badly in ways that are not nice, leading each other on even though they're supposed to be good and we're supposed to be sort of on their side, it just seems like this is actually true of young people. This is how young people act. And maybe I'm just kind of old. I know I'm not a baby to a 70-year-old, but I guess the reality is I'm in my mid-30s. And to recognize that teenagers are pretty much contradictions often. And that's something itself discussed in the show. So I'm not going to be too critical about that, but it does offer me some opportunity to be like, girl, you shouldn't have sent that message to Moritz when you were like, hey, if you find some good Molly, let me know. Like, he's gonna go look for that drugs if you say that type of thing, you know? Anyway, finally, I'd like to say that this show really made me want to take drugs. You're kidding, right? Yeah, I'm kind of kidding. I don't really want to be on real drugs. I just want to be like a young person enjoying it in the way they are, because I know this show is not really trying to glorify it, but it's just that the drug world does glorify these things sometimes. It's a horrible thing that when it comes to things like taking pills, like ecstasy, that drug dealers do make these things into like little transformer shapes or Superman symbols and stuff like that to make it seem like they're actually vitamins and things that we took when we were young that tasted kind of fun and cool. But these things are horrible for the brain and the body. And so the reality is, maybe I don't want to take drugs, I just want to eat Skittles, or I just want to eat Pez things or something when I see it. Because that intro with the smiley faces and all the drugs, like, I mean, like, wow, it just seems so fun and so cool and everything like that. But I know it's horrible. I have no intention of actually taking drugs. I mean, if I did, I definitely wouldn't know how to sell it or buy it, because I don't actually have this kind of my shop online or anything like that. And while I would support Moritz, I don't want to contribute the Good Times guy. After all, they friggin' killed a Purple Rain dude. Who's my dude? Or dudette? You know, whatever. I don't know who he is, or she. I don't know who that person is, but you know, that was the best part of the show that I missed out on. So join me for my review of season 2 after I watch it. I'm not going to do a full recap. I'm just going to talk about it, okay? I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe. I will do a full recap of season 2.